In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can generate your own Kubernetes Manifest File Examples, plain, simple, vanilla starting cases, just using this kubectl create command. Of course, you can also go to the Kubernetes documentation site. You can go to GitHub and look through other people's code. I do both of those too, but sometimes it's great just to be able to do it on the command line, whether you're working on a real world production or lower environment cluster, whether you're even in an interview maybe, doing some kind of test, whatever situation it may be, even in examination. These are going to be useful for you, kubectl create commands. Now before we go on, I just want to show you that I'm going to use K instead of kubectl. Most of you already know this, so this is how you do it. You just say like alias K equals kubectl, press enter, and then instead of typing kubectl you can always press K. If you didn't know that already, please use it from now on. If you're ever in an interview and you're typing in kubectl, you're going to look like you've only ever studied and never actually worked on a real cluster, so just to let you know. So the first thing I want to show you is the help command for kubectl create. There's help commands for every type of command, and let's have a look. What I want to do is scroll up here and just show you that these are some of the available resources that we can create. And we're going to go through some of these, the ones that I think are common, and it's also worth using create in order to generate these. Some of them it's just not worth using at all. One thing I'll mention as well, if you're using AI to help you come up with commands and stuff, that's great. I do that all the time, but it may hallucinate and try to suggest things that are impossible to create with create. The only things that you can create are the ones in this list, just to let you know. So one of the common commands that you'll do on the fly quite often is you just need a new namespace, and you can just go create ns. Of course you can put this in a manifest, and long term it's something that you should do, but often you just need to create one on the fly. It's just create ns and whatever you want. So if I do a get ns, we can see that I've already have some existing namespaces, but there's a new one. It's been active for 3 seconds. So the next resource I want to create is a classic. It's a Kubernetes deployment. I just need some vanilla code. So create deployment. I'm going to call it nginx. It could be many switches. All I'm going to specify here is the image. That's it, nothing else. And there we go, it's been created. Now if I do a get deploy, which is short for deployment, nginx, then we can see it's there. Now if I just simply edit this and remove get and type edit, then this is one way that you can get the full manifest. Obviously it's in YAML here. Now you can copy and paste this into a new file, but this here is really just kedit is for on the fly edits directly live on the cluster. That's not what we want to do. It is a nice way to look at it, by the way, because it's got all these colors and stuff like that. It's easier to read than just simple white on black, but apart from that I wouldn't really use it. Also it's kind of a little bit risky. I mean, we're in Vi or Vim or whatever, and you will have to confirm that you're writing, but you could easily accidentally just type in WQ by accident maybe. So I don't really recommend using kedit. Luckily there is an alternative, so let's get out of here. Just gonna go Q exclamation to not write anything. Now what I've done here is I've just replayed that earlier command get deploy nginx, but I've added YAML on the end. By the way, there can be a space between the YAML and the O, but a lot of people, because it's just easy to type on the fly, you don't need that space, and personally I don't put the space in. If it was written in a script, you would probably put the space. It's a bit easier to read, but when you're doing it for yourself as a command, don't bother. So get deploy nginx YAML, and look what we get here. And this is the same, but we now have this output. So for example, if I replay this, I could say manifest.yaml, and there manifest.yaml. If I do a cat on manifest.yaml, and there we go, we've got that file saved. We can now edit it, etc., etc. Now the first thing that you're probably saying is this is really super difficult to read because we don't have those colors available. So let me show you a better command. If I replay that command, but instead what we do is we add YQ on the end, then you get this. You get it in colors. This is a lot easier to read, and we're going to be using YQ a lot shortly. And if you didn't know already, YQ is, as it says here, this is the GitHub page for it, it's open source software. It's a YAML processor. It also does JSON. You might have heard of JQ already, which has been around for years. YQ was invented to be the same thing that JQ is, a processor for JSON, but we need one now for YAML. There are two versions, by the way. Make sure that you use the one that says Mike Farah. Do not use the other one. The one that everyone is using for Kubernetes is the one that says Mike Farah. So you can see here, just to confirm, that it uses JQ-like syntax, but it works with YAML files as well as JSON and other formats as well. This is really cool. I'm not going to go through this here. I'm going to show you some examples of using YQ. I recommend you install YQ on your laptop, but of course it may be that if you're using a jump box or some kind of bastion, you may not have additional tools available, in which case I'm going to show you some alternative later. So yeah, personally I think YQ is really useful, even if all you want to do is look at the live resource itself in the YAML format like this. Even if you're not going to do any manipulation, you can go kedit or you can pipe it through YQ and you get this, which is great. Now you may have noticed that for a manifest that we want to use and as the basis for our own resource manifest, it's full of a lot of garbage, and the big one is status, because obviously this has been added. Even if you have a deployment that you write in a manifest file and you apply it, and when it's live on the cluster it'll get added a few different sections. The big one is status. We don't need this garbage. This is useful in this particular case, but if we want to make our own, we don't need it. There's also as well usually a whole lot of stuff on the metadata, for example annotations, creation timestamp, resource version, UID, etc. The good news is we can get rid of this. Let me show you. So what I've done is I've just replayed that last command, but now I'm going to add something on the end, parameters here. So I'm going to put a couple of single quotes. I'm going to put del for delete and then parentheses, and then here is where you specify which parts of that YAML sort of tree that you want to get rid of. So in this case, let's just say we want to get rid of the whole of status, and then if I press enter, and you can see now it's a lot shorter. Yes, it starts with the usual things, metadata, I haven't touched this, spec, but after spec there's no status. So from this command we were able to get rid of that. So if you have the access to YQ on your laptop, you will, but wherever you may be, if you have access to YQ, this is one way of getting rid of fields. And here's another example, a huge example. I've just modified the last one, but not only status, we also want to add not the whole of metadata, but just some specific parts. So metadata annotations, creation timestamp, resource version, and UID. So if I press enter now, then it's a lot better, it's a lot cleaner. So look at this. This looks almost good to go. Maybe there's still a couple of other things that I want to delete, but this is great as a basis for what we want to do. So we can then redirect that to a file .yaml, and fantastic. Now I've shown you YQ so far because it's just a simple command that you can use once you've installed that tool, and it's easily available, it's used everywhere. You could even use it if you wanted to as well in a pipeline, for example. But much better tool, which you may not be able to use everywhere, but on your local laptop for sure, is kubectl neat, and this does exactly the same thing. So go to GitHub, go to this itask kubectl-neat, and you can see here that it gets rid of what's marked in red here, and it actually gives a list down here of everything that it gets rid of. And the best way to install it, I recommend, is to use kubectl crew. Crew is like it's kind of like I think like a package manager, if I remember correctly, for kubectl. So this is a really great way, and the way that you use it is you go yaml and then you pipe it through kubectl neat, and it's as simple as that. So I would use this, but if you can't use this, then use YQ, and obviously you can't really use this kind of operator type tool in a pipeline, for example, or in a script, so you'd be better off with YQ. Anyway, different tools for different use cases. I'm going to now run through some of the other common resources that I recommend. So for example, if you want to create a service that is attached to a deployment, then you need to use actually not kcreate, but you need to use kexpose. So kexpose, the deployment, nginx already created. We want type cluster IP. We could have something else. Node port, load balancer, port 80, target port 80. And there we go. The service is being created, so let's do a kget service nginx. And there it is. You can see cluster IP exactly, port 80. And if we now do the same thing, but we say, oh YAML, then just like before we get the info. And just like before, we can use YQ or kubectl neat to get rid of things like this. But again, we got a really vanilla sort of thing that we can use, and that's great. That's just what we wanted. So let's create a one-off job. This is something that you may want to just do on the fly. So here we're going to create a job. It's going to be based on the busybox image, because that already we can easily run shell and run this command here, this echo command. So let's do that. There we go. Job was created. We can just run this command klogs jobs my job, and that's just to confirm that it's successfully working. And if we want to look at it, we can do the usual kget job, name of the job, oh YAML. Of course, in this case, it's got the garbage that we don't necessarily need, but it has everything else that we need. So spec, containers, command, etc. That it did all for us because we did it in a single command. But if we need the manifest, because we prefer to have a manifest that we can apply repeatedly later, then this is a great way. So similarly, if you don't know, we can also create a cron job, which is just a periodic creation of a job. So in this case, it's very similar to what happened last time. The only difference is that it'll do this every minute. And there we go. And now we can do a kget cj, is short for cron job. And there it is, exactly as we wanted. And we can look at the YAML in the usual way. And of course, actually, there's nothing under here, but yeah, you can see here the job template, the spec, etc. The schedule as well. And this is the default. It'll keep a history. It'll keep the most recent 3 jobs, i.e. 3 pods, but that can be changed as well. But yeah, you can see the default. So this is also a cool way to see the defaults that Kubernetes sets with commands. So another one we can do is a config map, which is a key value type resource. Okay, create config map. This is just for like configuration settings that are needed to be loaded at runtime, not secrets. So create config map, call it my config, and literally going to put in key 1 and a value of 1. And as usual, let's do a kget cm, short for config map, my config YAML. And there we go, very simple. There isn't much to it really, is there? If you take away the metadata fields that we don't need, there you go, it's under data, key 1, value 1. Now let's say that we want to extract the value from that key or any other key that we've added. Then this is how you do it. I've replayed that same command, but now I'm using YQ to say get me the value according to this full path to the key, .data.key1. And there you go, came back with value 1. Now here's what I was talking about earlier. Let's say you don't even have access to YQ, which is unusual, but I could understand maybe on some kind of jump box or bastion where nothing is allowed to be installed, but it sounds kind of crazy, to be honest. But this would also work, I believe, in a Kubernetes exam. I don't believe you have access to JQ. Then you'll have to use something like this: JSON path equals .data.key1. It's similar but a different format. You can see that there's single quote, that there's these braces, and we get the same thing, although there's no carriage return or line feed, it looks like. I will say one thing, that if you're doing something like this, extracting values in this way, whether YQ or JSON path, it tends to be best only for getting one value. It is possible to loop over and get more than one. However, as you'll see later, the formatting is not great. So now we're going to do the same thing but get a secret. So we're going to create a generic type secret, called my secret, and very similar, we're going to have here that password is my password. There we go, secret's been created. Now let's have a look at the manifest in the usual way. Kget secret my secret YAML, and there we go. And you can see here that the secret, it's similar to a config map, but the key value, the value in particular, is base 64 encoded, so we need to decode that. So we're replaying the last command. We're going to run it through YQ to get the value under data password, and then we're going to run base64 with the tacd flag to decode it, because normally I think if you miss that out it encodes it. So we want to decode that, and there you go, it comes out with my password. And this is something I haven't tested already, but based on what we saw for the config map, pretty sure this will work. You can use JSON path instead of YQ, so fingers crossed. I'll bet $100 that this should work. And there we go, it worked. And if you didn't know already, by the way, secrets are not encrypted. As you can see, they're just encoded, they're easily decrypted. So just putting a secret in a resource like this is not sufficient to secure it. You have to go further. People experienced with Kubernetes already know this, but if you're a noob, you might be quite surprised that secrets are easily decoded, let's say. Now finally, I just wanted to show you that there are limits to using JSON path and iterating over several things to produce what you want. So in here we want to get a list of all the names of pods, and you'll see what I mean when we do this. So we have a number of pods: cron jobs, nginx, deployment, etc. And you can see the way all it's done is space separate them. So this is not super useful, not useful at all really. And that is the limitation of trying to extract more than one value out of the manifest, or just generally out of the resource itself. This is, this is not really plucking it out of the manifest, so to speak. It's kind of really getting it out of the resource, and it's not the best way. And as if to underline that limitation, let's say that you wanted to get from all of your pods, you wanted to get the names versus the status. This is the kind of command that you could use, but look at what you get. You see here, they're all space separated. First the pod names, and then a whole bunch of statuses. It's really not great. Now this command here is an improvement. As you can see here, this is way better. However, I would be challenged to remember this unless I'm doing these kind of operations day in, day out. I think this would be a very big challenge to remember. So you're not going to come up with this in any kind of interview, assessment, or exam or anything like that. I think this is just too difficult to remember. At that stage, it's better to just use the kind of table functions of the kubectl output. And if it's already in get pods or get pods wide, then just use awk to print columns like this. This is far easier to remember. So anyway, if you survived until this stage, really appreciate you coming along to check out how you can generate your own manifests directly on the command line using kubectl create. And if you did enjoy this, please give it a thumbs up, and I will see you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.